The council chamber fell into a charged hush as the guards hauled Theory into the center of the enormous circular hall. The young Crotha's scales trembled with fear, colors sliding from a fierce crimson to an ashen gray as all eyes, alien and human alike, flickered across its many faces. Heavy chains clinked against the polished floor, each link engineered from reinforced titanium, rated to secure beasts much larger than this adolescent. There was no disputing what Theory had done. 3 solar cycles earlier, during Station Harmony's Integration Festival, the cub had snapped. The dizzying smells of fresh food, the overwhelming sensory rush of thousands of species mingling, and the raw hunting instincts encoded in Croth lineage converged in a single catastrophic instant. A human child, around 7 standard years old, had wandered too near. Theory's predatory reflex surged. Claws extended. Blood flowed. The boy survived only because surgeons rebuilt his arm, a reconstruction that left both physical scars and an indelible memory. Under galactic law, Article 3.7, the sentence was clear. Theory must die. Ambassador Zelthic of the Krath Dominion stood bowed, for arms folded in supplication. The council recognizes the gravity of this offense, the elder Krath rumbled, voice heavy with sorrow. We accept the evidence. We seek no mercy. Justice must be done. The Krotha's grief vibrated in the chamber. Councillor Vex, the Trian adjudicator, whose crystalline form fractured the hall's light into dull rainbows, declared the human delegation had the right to speak. As the injured party, their word carried great weight. Representative Walsh rose, diplomatic formality etched into her features, to acknowledge humanity's pain and the fear the incident had sown aboard the station. Her prepared words hung in the air when an interruption cut them short. A man in the observer seats had stood without authorization. Translators crackled. Identify yourself, Vex demanded, crystalline body souring in displeasure. The man answered, boots ringing on the floor. Draven Cole, security chief for Station Harmony Human Division, and the father of the injured child. The chamber went still. Ambassador Zelthic's scales blanched. Walsh's composed diplomacy fractured. Draven moved forward with calm authority. He invoked Article 3.7. It explicitly grants the injured party or their direct family the right of intervention before a sentence is carried out. The guard stepped back, uneasy. Vex challenged him. Theory had nearly killed his son. The council murmured that Theory was still a child. Yet Draven's presence and the law he cited shifted the room's atmosphere. He would not be silenced. The chamber hummed with a new electricity as Draven strode to the center, every bootstep echoing with purpose. He stood only meters from Theory's chained form. Up close, the Croth still looked young, larger than a human adolescent but unmistakably a juvenile, with rounder features and clumsy movements that betrayed its inexperience. The judges and ambassadors traded glances. This was a child who had made a terrible mistake. Representative Walsh, anger threading her voice, reminded the assembly what had been lost. Your son will carry those scars for life, she said. Draven didn't flinch. He answered with the raw honesty that would come to define his plea. He had held his boy while surgeons pieced his arm back together. He had listened to the screams. He had watched his child flinch at the sight of non-humans. He had seen how deeply that night had wounded his family. Ambassador Zelthic's voice broke with grief and remorse. Why would you stop this? He asked, pleading for the punishment they had accepted. We accept our guilt. We accept the punishment. Why would you offer mercy we do not deserve? The Croth elder's penitence was palpable. His entire species bowed under the weight of shame. Draven knelt, closing the distance between himself and the trembling Croth. He ignored the warning hisses of the guards. He told them a story not only of one injured child but of humanity's own long arc. 3 centuries ago, humans had been feared, aggressive, territorial, and violent when they first reached the stars. They had fought wars over things they did not need and had nearly destroyed themselves. When they encountered alien species they came across as predators. Other worlds feared them. But some species chose to see us differently, Draven continued. Some gave us a chance. He explained he had visited Theory the day before, sitting outside the detention cell and watching. Not as an executioner, but as a witness to a small, broken creature repeating the single phrase that had lodged in Draven's chest. I'm sorry. For hours, the cub had whispered apology after apology, not the calculated denial of monsters, but the remorse of a child. The point landed hard. Monsters do not apologize. Children do. Draven's voice grew steady and fierce. If children could feel remorse and learn, perhaps justice should protect that possibility. He argued that mercy could be a stronger gesture than retribution. The room absorbed his conviction like a vacuum. Representative Walsh pressed on, her voice laced with concern for precedent. To bend the law for one case could ripple through the galaxy, she warned. Leniency might be seen as weakness. The council flinched at the legal and political ramifications. Galactic law was exacting and, until now, seldom questioned in cases of lethal transgressions. Councillor Vex's crystalline form flickered with consternation. The adjudicator's duty was to the law as it stood. Draven met those objections head-on. He framed his intervention not as emotional sentimentality but as a deliberate choice to advance a broader definition of justice. Justice, he argued, is not only about punishment. It's also about protection and rehabilitation. He insisted that the society they all tried to uphold should be judged by its capacity to transform its young, especially those whose instincts, ancient and genetic, had been triggered in a moment of sensory overload. He proposed a concrete, conditional path: spare Theory's life, but not without accountability. Theory would be enrolled in a supervised rehabilitation program under Draven's oversight. The cub would work with human children, learning side by side in controlled environments. This would be carefully monitored, designed both to protect vulnerable humans and to facilitate genuine growth within the Croth. The program would teach children of different species to overcome mutual fear, to forgive mistakes, and to recognize that diversity could be a source of strength rather than a cause for distrust. Ambassador Zelthic listened, scales shifting back and forth as if the words themselves altered his color. He had come to accept the sentence. Now he wondered if mercy could be granted without betrayal. The Croth elder asked, voice rough with emotion, "You would truly spare our child?" Draven's answer was steady. "I would," he said. The council withdrew to deliberate. The passage of time became a taut thing, every heartbeat magnified, every whisper interpreted. Exactly 7 minutes passed. The chamber's silence was almost ceremonial. When Vex returned, the crystalline adjudicator's body shone with the weight of their conclusion. For an unprecedented case, precedent itself had been re-examined. When Councillor Vex resumed the chamber, the atmosphere snapped taut with expectation. The adjudicator's crystalline form gleamed as they declared a ruling that would ripple far beyond station harmony. The right of intervention was granted. Execution would be suspended. A rehabilitation protocol would be established, and Chief Draven Cole, by his own invocation of Article 3.7, would supervise the program. The declaration landed like a chorus of stunned relief and wary hope. As the guards unlocked Theory's restraints and removed the chains, the cub's color returned, crimson bleeding back through the gray, like something fragile regaining warmth. The young Croft lifted its head and fixed its many eyes on Draven with a bewildered, almost reverent expression. In halting, broken universal, strained by Croth vocal anatomy, the cub whispered the single word that had echoed through the corridors of confinement: "Why?" Draven lowered himself and offered the simplest response possible: a hand. He explained softly why he had intervened. Because, he said, someone once offered humanity mercy. Because that act of compassion helped forge the civilized world they now shared. Because mercy, deliberate, brave, and costly, is what separates civilization from savagery. It creates space for repair, for learning, for the slow building of mutual trust. After a long pause, Theory reached out with a tentative, clawed hand and brushed Draven's palm with the gentleness of a tentative promise. That small contact, a touch between species across a gulf of history, crystallized the moment. For a single instant, the galaxy's future felt quietly altered, less fearful, a little more hopeful. As Draven guided Theory away under the watch of the newly sanctioned rehabilitation protocol, the council remained in solemn reflection. Ambassador Zelthic's posture softened. Representative Walsh stood with a face that was hard to read: relief, cautious optimism, or professional concern for the road ahead. Councillor Vex's crystalline light dimmed into something like contemplative approval. The verdict would be filed, debated, and taught in councils and classrooms for cycles to come. But in that chamber, what mattered most was the tiny human scale of a touch, a parent's choice to forgive, a child's capacity to say, "I'm sorry," and the hard, hopeful work of helping both learn to live together. In that small gesture, the galaxy felt, for a moment, a little more human in the best sense of the word.